Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Sarah Naia Soleil, who is a gifted clairvoyant. She's a mother of two and has been practicing as a birth doula and student midwife since 2008. She specializes in preconception mentorship, spirit baby communication, and supporting pregnancy and birth as a spiritual rite of passage. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
I always know when someone comes up in conversation, like several times, which happened leading up to us having this time together. Just that I was hearing about you and your work and was very curious and interested, and happened to come home from a vacation and see someone wanting to introduce us in my email inbox, and it was just so perfect. So I am really grateful to have this time with you, and I'm super curious and interested in everything you're doing in your work.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I've interviewed a couple clairvoyants before, and I'm always so curious, how did you discover those abilities? Was this something you always knew about yourself? What was that kind of a awakening or realizing for you of your own spiritual and connection to these other realms?
Yeah. I actually grew up in a pretty suburban mainstream family. I think my mother was religious. We went to church more than once a week, actually. She was raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I'm the oldest of 6. And I would say that I had an awakening one day. It really, I don't know that this is the beginning, but this is where I feel called to begin from here today. And it was really a moment. I was 17. I was living out of the house. I was going to college in Santa Barbara. And I just remember walking, and gorgeous. You could see the ocean. You could see so many beautiful people, so much just kind of beauty in the air. But I remember walking that day and just feeling the weight of something that I couldn't describe. And the next thought that went through my mind is, there has to be something more. There has to be something more than what I've been shown, than what I've been told. And I had certainly had some experiences as a child. I'll never forget the day of confirmation, which happened to me, and most often happens in a Catholic upbringing in your teen years. And I'll never forget, the pastor was actually a good friend of our family. And he just looked at me in this very sweet way, very gentle way. And he just said, "You know what? You're really glowing today." And I'll never forget that moment. But walking on the bridge that day, walking along the campus, there was just a heavy weight. And so I would say that moment really, everything began to change from there. So one thing I've learned much later, at least in an ability to put this into words, is that when we begin to live a question, or just even the idea that we can live a question. And so often one of my mentors, the one who really introduced me to this concept, she would always ask me, "What question are you living right now? What question are you living? What question are you living today? What question are you living right now in your 30th year around the sun?" She would ask, or it just always brought it deeper into my awareness every time she would ask. I'm like, yeah. And so in that moment at 17, not realizing it, I began to live a question. And that the question that was really alive for me was, there just has to be something more. Is there something more than this kind of mainstream pop world culture? And magical things began to happen. You start to meet new people, and you start to think new thoughts, and you start to question more, and like, why do I dress this way? And do I need makeup? And why do I wear makeup? And why do I shave my legs? And I just had so many questions. I became so curious and questioned everything and just wanted more. There has to be something more. I feel dead, and I feel happy, but some part of me feels dead. And what is that? It actually wasn't long after that I conceived a child. I would say maybe a year later. And so for me personally, and why I often am drawn to the work that I do, is that my greatest awakenings really came hand in hand with the conception of my first child, and my pregnancy and my birth experience with my son at 20 was an experience of tasting enlightenment. It was an enlightenment experience. And so I would say everything leading up to that point, like, again, continued questions. And that it happened with pregnancy too. I was so afraid to give birth. Actually, the idea of giving birth, even as a child, was one of the scariest thoughts that would go through my mind. And I always just thought, no, I'm just never going to do that. I can adopt. I can be an auntie. Like, I don't need to have kids. That sounds horrible. But here I am, young, and living these big questions far beyond my understanding of the impact of them, and just starting to get like a taste of some of these synchronicities and experiences, and just mind started opening, and new roommates came in that were pretty far out and like talking about aliens, and just like so many things, and the birth. And so in my pregnancy, I started to think the same thing, like, okay, everybody talks about the pain. I know, I get that. On some level, I get like, okay, it can be really intense, like, and how will I cope with that? And yeah, that's my biggest fear. And there was that question again of like, but there has to be something more. It's just pain. That's it. That's all it can be. It's just horror. And that's what I have to go through to become a mom. Really? Because when I thought back, I'm like, my mom didn't have horrible births. My mom actually had positive experiences. So I'm not sure really where that fear came from, or where that negative programming really set in, probably through the media and what we see on TV. The panic and the racing through the halls, and like the water breaks and the chaos, and it's like sweating and like everyone's freaking out. And so I think I just had it in my mind like that. So I started to live those questions. And then, the prenatal yoga teacher that I started working with also taught me a lot about my pituitary gland and my pineal gland, and how they can excrete special hormones when you give birth that can help you to have awakening experiences. And like one thing kind of led to another. And so when I went in to give birth, I'm grateful that I was able to authentically go into it with a very curious mind and an open heart. And there was even a sense of joy. And there was even a sense of settling in to my body in a way that I hadn't yet. And that really came from kind of the beautiful women and guides and mentors that showed up along the way as I started living these deeper questions. So, one lesson I've learned along the way is that those who seek, those who truly, sincerely desire to awaken to supreme truths or greater truths, sincerity is everything. The question is part of the answer. Like the answer is in the question, just so to expand our minds in that way and what it can bring has been very powerful part of my awakening. And that's kind of how it all started for me, was just those questions and that curiosity.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
There's so much, beauty in that, in the mystery, the feminine, just the questions.
The questions. Yeah.
So that birth experience, how did it go? Was it very awakening? What was
Yeah.
it like for you?
Yeah, it was amazing. Long story short, I ended up giving birth at home, which was something I never, ever thought I would do. I didn't even know you could do that. Actually, I thought, isn't the first thought I had on my husband, or he's now my husband, but at the time my partner, he just said, well, we could do this at home. We could hire midwives. And is that legal? Like, can you do that? Because I just really didn't know. And I didn't know anything about birth. And I didn't even know that was an option. And he had been born at home, and he had a really different upbringing. He was born at home and was raised in a beekeeping family and lived in teepees in the summer in the mountains, and just had like a really beautiful but very different life. And I think that's why we ultimately gravitated towards each other. We had so much to teach each other about these other worlds and how to like extract the best of them, and how to find the middle path. And so the birth, well, everyone, we had roommates, and we had a bunch of surprise guests that showed up the night before. Like everybody showed up out of nowhere. Like my husband's brother just kind of showed up. He never does that. Like everyone just showed up and ended up sleeping over. And so when I woke up the next morning, my water broke. I was 40 weeks. Felt like I was ready, and it was a big party. And we all made pancakes and danced around the kitchen, and I didn't have any contractions yet, and called the midwife, and the midwife just talked me through it and walked me through it and said, yeah, everything's good. You may start having contractions soon, so just let me know when that happens. And in the meantime, do A, B, and C, and don't do A, B, and C. And so I was just like, great. So we had a huge celebration, and then we kicked everyone out. But then we didn't want to sit at home. And one of the things my childbirth educator had always said was like, continue living normal life. Don't just sit and stare at each other. It's exhausting, and it's harder to get things going. So we decided to go to a very special beach. One thing I want to share actually real quickly, and then I'm going to expedite that story because it's a long one, is that there was a point, I was 5 months pregnant, and I started having bleeding. I started bleeding. And the midwife said, okay, 3 days in bed. And I thought, okay. And I knew it in every cell of my being. I was standing at a crossroads, and the question was, did I really want to do this? Was I willing? Was I accepting? Was I choosing this baby and this chapter? Because of course, being so young, I had other, I had dreams. I had big dreams, and I had other ideas about my life. And I even had like, feelings for other men in my life. I had only been with this partner for 3 months, and it was gorgeous, and I loved him in a new way that I had never felt before. But there was a lot of like unresolved energy. And it was just a big question for me. So that showed up in the pregnancy. So the midwife said 3 days in bed, and I knew I was really questioning the pregnancy. So on the third night, I had a really powerful lucid dream, and the baby took my hand in the dream, and he led me down 3 different pathways. And one pathway was, following love with a different man. And it showed me what was like around the bend and what was going on there. And then the other dream was traveling and doing some other, like going in a different direction in life. And I kind of got to go down that road and see what was around the bend. And I got to just have this incredible experience, this vivid, alive, lucid experience in the dream time of just being able to see all the different ways I could go forward and what the lessons would be for me on the other side. And I could see from that dream that having this child, even though I felt so afraid in the mystery of it, that this truly was my highest vibrational path forward. This was the happiest, life for me. And I woke up and went to a place called Butterfly Beach and watched the sunrise and placed my hands on my belly, which was starting to get quite big at that point. And I just said to the baby, I just said, I choose you. I want you to come. I want to be your mother. I want to give birth to you. I want to know what this is, what this love is, what this journey is. And so to fast forward, when my husband and I decided to leave the house, after we had the big pancake breakfast, we went to that beach and we did some meditation, and my husband did some yoga on the beach, and the waves were glistening, the sun was sparkling, everything was so exquisitely beautiful. And I just really dropped into my trust. And it was shortly after that the contractions began. And so just really in a nutshell, the birth itself, the first contraction completely took my breath away and brought me to my knees. It was not mild or simple at all. And I immediately felt betrayed, and all that fear rushed back in. And I just thought, no way. There's no way. There's no way I can do this. There's no way all the women who come before me have done this. This is way too hard. And all the fear rushed in, and all the thoughts connected to that fear rushed in. And my poor partner was just, in some ways very lovely. He lit sage, and he wanted to go out into the garden and be like, no, you can't into the garden. Like, help me. And he did his best, and he definitely was very, very sweet and kind to me, but he did go to the garden. And I think that was actually good, just to set the space energetically and just kind of call in the guides. And we forget we're that powerful. We forget sometimes that calling in the guides, calling in the beings who can guide the way and support the process, that, they can't up and intervene, is my experience, unless we ask for support. And so to call in that support, to welcome it, to bring it home, to give it permission, really creates a new energy in the space. And so I think it's a very beautiful role that fathers can play, whether that includes sage or not, whether they're in the hospital or in their backyard. It can even do it in your heart, anywhere, any moment. And remember that we're connected and never alone. So that was his very sweet contribution. And the midwife came, which changed everything. Of course, when you have a team that supports your intention, it's much easier to reach your goal. If you want a natural birth, but you're choosing a care provider that doesn't really believe in natural birth, there can be conflict, and it's easier to get into sticky situations. It's just kind of how it goes. So to have a birth plan or an intention that matches with, the environment you've chosen and the people you've chosen to support you, doesn't guarantee you to have a certain outcome, but it does guarantee that you will be supported in your intention. And that's very powerful. So I was blessed to have a woman with me who felt familiar instantly. The moment I saw her, everything down to her fingernails, everything about this woman was known to me in a way that could not be spoken. And so she came and checked me and said, "Oh, you're 2 centimeters. It's so great." And I was like, "Oh, I'm done." No. And it had been maybe a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours max. So she helped me back to my breath. I asked to be alone, and I went into the shower alone, shut the door. The sun was setting, and it was the most humbling moment of my life, because I knew there was no getting out of this. I had to figure my way out. Like I just knew it was like I had to do this. No one else was going to do this for me. And honestly, what came to me to do was to really call on those Christ codes and those Christ lineages. And I called out and I just said, "I need your help. I need you to guide me through this. I don't know how to get through this. I don't know how to be with this feeling. I don't know how to trust this process. I'm really afraid and frightened. And I need some support." And the next thing that happened is I started to enter a transcendent state. and a deep, deep state of meditation. And I could see when I looked down that my body was still contracting, but there was no more pain. So the pain completely dissolved. And so it was threefold. It was feeling connected to my body and in my body, but having no discomfort whatsoever. It was the beginning of recognizing myself as a healer, as what naturally began to occur next was, as I kind of remained in that state of oneness, people in my life that I loved started to form a line. I had my eyes closed, and it was like this line formed of people, and they would walk toward me one by one and just share with me like their deepest heart's vulnerability or their deepest challenge in their life. And I could see, literally with my third eye, could see the root of the problem and how to support them in healing it and activating the soul lesson that they were truly seeking to grow into. And so that was the second piece. And the third part of me, right, my conscious mind, my skeptical mind, was watching the whole thing like, this is so nuts, what is going on? But just surrendered to it. And 45 minutes later, I was crowning and felt the burn of my baby's head, and reached down and felt my baby's head. And the midwife was leaving. She was telling my husband there's going to be a really long birth and a really long night, and that he should lay down and try to get some rest while I was alone and had asked to be alone. So he should really just prepare a few things around the house and then rest. And so she was leaving, walking out to her car. He was in the kitchen, and I just kind of yelled for both of them. And they came running in. What's wrong? What's wrong? And it was just like, the baby. And 15 minutes later, my son was in my arms. And, as I pushed him out, there was a moment, literally like a flash of light came into my third eye. And this moment, what I heard and felt in every part of my body after that flash of light was, I know this. I know this. I know this. I know birth. I know birth in my bones and beyond time. And I'm here to help other women go through that process. And that was it. And then it was over. And then my son was in my arms. My husband did the delivery. The midwife was adorable and just watched the whole thing and went, wow, wow, wow. Oh my gosh, wow. And I remember looking at her at one point and being like, do something, and she was like, I don't have to. You're doing it all yourself. But she was right. And forever changed. 20 with a baby boy on my chest, and my husband kissing me all over, and just in total shock. And I think I really spent the last decade, if not longer, really integrating that experience, and also going much deeper into the initiation of what that is.
Wow. What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing all of that, and just, the calling on support and the support being right there with you. Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. Mm-hmm. And I know this was the beginning of your journey of helping other women through this, and you went on to have another child. What did you learn in that in-between time of preparing for your next child and thinking about that conception, or any rituals that you help other people with in that state of wanting to have a child and preparing for that?
Yeah. So something that I love, love, love to teach about is what I call the art of preconception. And so this is great because this is really a big piece that I want to share today. So the art of preconception, and I'll weave in little bits and pieces of my story. So my son, of course, was very much unplanned. I was young, I was just like young in love and not necessarily prepared in a material, physical way. I lived with roommates, was a college student, wasn't even paying for my car insurance. My dad was still financially supporting me quite a bit, and it's a big thing to say yes to. And when I had my daughter, I was 25, and we lived at so a lot opened up and awakened in me, of course, after that first birth experience. But by the time I was 25, we were living at a spiritual retreat center in Ojai, California, the Ojai Foundation. And that's where my daughter was conceived. And, there's a lot to be said in as far as my own story and learning, because I was really clinging to, with my second, this concept of conscious conception that, I had been to over 50 births at that time in between my two children. I had seen a lot, learned a lot about birth imprints and our own initial sequences and how they go on to inform us in our adult years. And as we conceive, as we give birth to our children, how often history has a way of repeating itself. So one example of that is that there's no mistake that when I conceived my son, I was living in the same exact geographical location. It was the very exact same age as my mother and father were when they conceived me. When they conceived me, I should say, the first time. So my parents had 2 abortions, and the third conception that they experienced was me. This is something my mother didn't share with me. And when I came to tell my mother, when I go back a little, I had my partner look at the pregnancy stick with our first. I was so frightened to look at it, and he came walking up the stairs, and I just knew by the weight in his feet that we were pregnant. And he didn't even say we're pregnant. The first thing he said is like, well, we could have an abortion. And I don't think he knew how that would hit me. I don't even know that he had thought things through all the way. And I think he just wanted me to know, because he could see the look, the horror and the look on my face, that he was willing to support me with, if I didn't want to do this. I think that's where he was coming from. But when he spoke those words to me, I didn't have a big opinion consciously at the time around abortion. And so I didn't know how that his words would strike me the way that they did. But instantly I was a puddle of tears. And I just knew that wasn't right for me. That wasn't right for me. And that was a big moment to realize that. That wasn't right for me. That wasn't right for the moment. But when I went home to tell my mom that I was pregnant, I came around the corner and I told her that I wanted to go to lunch. And she walked around the corner to meet me, and she just looked at me. All she knew is that I wanted to go to lunch. And she comes around the corner and we meet each other, and she says, "You're pregnant." And I was like, what the heck? You're crazy. How did you know that? She's like, oh, I always knew it would happen like this. And I was so shocked. And I remember looking at her and thinking, what are you talking about? And we went to lunch, and she said, oh, there's so much I have to tell you. And she told me, for the first time verbally, she told me about the abortions and how she understood that history has a way of repeating itself. And so the fact she really saw my choosing to have this baby as a healing, because she wished that she had said yes the first time. And the first time she would have been, again, in the same geographical location, Santa Barbara, and the same age, 20. So it was a healing for her. It was a healing for us. Certainly I was confused, disoriented, a little bit frustrated that she had kept the truth for so long, because, that always played out in my childhood. I was always so upset with her, always from the beginning. Like as a toddler, I was mean. I was so upset with her, and was constantly just pushing her away, and really had pushed her away up until that moment. And it was like the moment she said the truth out loud, something in me softened. A wall came down around my heart. And for the first time, I felt like we could be honest with each other, and I could understand myself even a little bit more, understanding that there were these abortions that came before, and a very keen knowing that was me. And it isn't always, a woman who has a history of abortion and has a child, now being someone who was spirit baby community, and that's not always the same soul that keeps coming back. For me and my mother, it was me. And And so to not have the abortion was a huge healing. And the tears that were there was really the tears of that memory. And so having my daughter, right, there was this whole righteousness around, we're going to have a conscious conception. We're going to do it different. We're not going to do it like we did it last time. I'm going to heal this with my dad, and you're going to go on this sacred ceremony journey, and I'm going to do this, and it's going to be so perfect. And we conceived. We conceived, and I had the thought, no, not yet. We haven't done all the things on our list. Like, it's not a conscious conception. No, and I was just so caught up in my own stuff around that. And I said, okay, you talk to the baby, and I'm going to talk to the baby. And we're just going to tell this baby we cannot be pregnant right now, and it has to come back. And so that's what we did. And the next day, I was already late. I was already having breast tenderness. Like, all the signs and symptoms were there. The lovemaking that would have conceived was very much there, had happened. Not sure what was going through my mind. But the next day I woke up and I bled.
Wow.
And I went and spoke with a mentor of mine, and she offered some clairvoyance and guidance and support, communicating with my baby's spirit. And she said, like, well, she really wants to come now, but she's willing to wait. She can wait. So I was like, great. Okay, good. Check. Great. Like, okay, we got to get on those. Like, we got to get on that list. And so the next month, conceived again, and was late again. All the symptoms, all the signs, like, it was all there. And I just went, no, again. And I said, okay, we can't, like, this can't happen again, but just one more time. Like, you just have to talk to the baby. I'll talk to the baby. It cannot happen. And my husband's like, we need to move. We need to, like, settle into our new job. And, like, because we were just moving to the retreat center. And I really wanted that to settle in. I had all these ideas, just how, like, someone can say, oh, I'm a Scorpio, you're a Leo. We really need to have our baby in this month, so it'll be a good fit for us. And, I was kind of in that way with it. I was kind of in this way of, like, this is how it has to be perfect. Yeah. And I want it to be perfect because last time it was out of our control, and it's just, something that came, and I had this kind of story around it that although it was healing, it could be better. So the next day after that day, I bled again, and it really hit me. And there was actually some grief around it, that I was fighting it, that I was trying to control it. And I wasn't willing to be part of the mystery and the dance with creation, and that I was rejecting it. And then the imprint of my own abortions really came up, and the grief really hit me, like, I'm doing it. Here's that sequence showing up, these two rejections. And I got to see myself, and I got to see that pattern, and I went, whoa, hold on. And I went for a walk on the beach in Santa Barbara, and my foot hit a huge, huge shell in the sand. And there's beautiful shells in Santa Barbara, but this was like the size of it's the size of a grapefruit. It was huge. And in it was carved the face of a child. And I picked up the shell, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And I said, okay, I get it. That, like, whatever I thought I had to do this perfect, whatever I thought I had to do this right, like, light the candles, burn the sage. Like, I chose in that moment, okay, right. I don't need to play God here. Like, I can just trust that you're ready, and that you're saying yes, and that there's a part of me that's saying yes too. And it really showed me, oh my gosh, we're so much more powerful than we realize. Like, I can speak to my womb. I'm a destiny thread in this. Like, I have a voice in this, just like with my son, when I started to waver and not just have, like, a thought or two, but I was really feeling frozen. I was really feeling like maybe going down that path with that pregnancy was maybe the worst mistake of my life. I was really, like, really scared. And so we're very powerful. And as women and as wombs and as mothers, we are, very much one of the key destiny threads to anchoring in a spirit baby contract, to bringing in a soul. just as I often say that it takes a minimum of 3 destiny threads to create a child or to bring a soul in. And that is, biologically speaking, the biological mother, the biological father, and the child themselves. You know, when there's adoptions or when there's twins or when there are same-sex couples, there can be, of course, many more destiny threads. But we are, as women, as wombs, as mothers, we are very much able to. We make these choices. You know, I found that even on the level of my soul, I was consenting to this pregnancy coming into my body both of those times, and I was consenting to the lessons that it would teach me, and the lessons were so rich and so beautiful. And so the next time we made love, we conceived. And guess what? We kept the baby. Yeah, she was knocking.
Wow.
And that pregnancy was the hardest time in my marriage. Most low I think I've ever been in my life. I felt really far away from the magic. I hated being pregnant. I wanted my body back. I had these thoughts of, like, why did I think this was a good idea? There was something about, I find the more that we surrender to the mystery and allow the magic to flow, the more grace we receive. And the more we try to control it, restrict it, the more we create chaos. And I think there's 2 pieces here. One of them is that I did wonder, looking back, had I just allowed her into our lives the first time we conceived her, how maybe conceiving her just a few months prior may have shifted things to feel more graceful, more easeful, that there was a divine intelligence in that timing. Although, no regrets, but it was just something that weighed on me a little. It was like, wow, I really felt like I was getting my butt kicked there. And at the same time, I'm grateful for that looking back, because I recognize my daughter as a being of such immense light. And it was clear to me only after she was born that all of the darkness that we traveled through together ultimately in that pregnancy was truly an opportunity to excavate. It was the darkness coming up and out. It wasn't meant to be a time of suffering. Suffering occurs when we identify with the victim consciousness. But when it's just coming up and out, how do we just, how do we surrender? How do we get out of its way and release it? So she really taught me a lot about how to release victim consciousness and how to excavate that darkness out, as she was such a being of light, and to hold her in my womb ultimately required that I dig deep and that I excavate some of that out, and I clear the pathway, and I open up to being in vibrational resonance with her light, so that I can truly be a guide for her and understand what she's here to give to the world and be a steward of that. So I had climbed some mountains there, but the birth itself was exquisite. It was so different from the first. And that was my every hope and dream, that I could feel it, that I could physically feel the whole way through, knowing now what I knew and being so distant from the fear of birth. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Deep in the throes of transition, I had a big smile on my face and just loved it. It was like, oh, I'm in transition. This is amazing. And, the midwife that I had with me before was with me again, and I'd actually been a student of hers for 3 years in between the two, so we were quite close, and she just looked at me and was like, you are so weird. Like, you are just such a goofball. Because I'm like, I love this. I do. I just, when we deepen into that trust, to feel that power, to feel that those bolts of energy moving through our body, and to harness them and to ride those waves. I just found, actually, honestly, in my second birth, found pleasure in it. Pleasure in making room to feel it and to be grounded in it. And I also recognize that that's something my daughter really required of me, or asked of me, was to feel it, was to be fully grounded in my body, present. she calls me into presence every day. And my son is very much like a little, like he's spiritual fire. It's the only way I know how to describe him. His consciousness is profound, and he has a fire to him. And so my children and my pregnancies and my birth experiences and working in birth have really truly been huge transformative years in my life. Experiences in my life have shown me things about the potential of our human consciousness and that we are truly not our bodies, yet we can be the masters within and of our bodies, and that they're, these vehicles for our souls. So much awakening has come for me through these chapters, and I find I'm not alone in that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And can you tell us more about spirit baby communication and the different forms it comes in, and how you support women today, and anything we could even do for women that want to become pregnant, connecting with the spirit?
Yeah. So I've shared a lot of my personal story today, but there's so much to be said about, again, the art of preconception, and for those who are entering those preconception years. So preconception is a phase or chapter in our life that occurs before conceiving a child. For some of us, that's conscious. We know we're preconception. We know we're preparing to welcome in a child in the coming months and years, and that we're preparing our lives for that consciously. And for some of us, it's maybe a thought in the back of our minds or deep in our hearts, but we're not very aware of it or not presently planning it. Conscious conception, I would just say, as I've shared my story, to me, it's really a conversation about consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, and that the level of consciousness at the time of conception between the two who are in union together to call in this child, consciously or unconsciously, right? The level of the consciousness at time of conception is the level of consciousness of which the being kind of begins their journey at. We all have the same seed of potential inside of us, but every being kind of has a starting place where they enter, and so very much like and that's not something to be judged so much, but something to consider. There's a lot that could be said there. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but preconception is often a very important time for Sobonfu Somé, a woman from the Dagara tribe in Africa who's no longer with us. She's an ancestor now. She speaks about preconception quite a bit in her life. She did anyway. And she would say, preconception is, and she didn't use that word per se, but it's a chapter in time for sorting out our own mess, for self-discovery, for understanding our beginnings and our own childhoods and how we'd like to improve things. And so, yes, there's a beauty in that. And there's a beauty to having that chapter, to consciously taking that time. And I would say it's the balancing act, right, of that and allowing your destiny thread to be woven. And I kind of spoke to that earlier. And surrendering to the mystery, listening for the heart's call and for the timing, the divine timing. And so it is very much, I think, meant to be this dance, conscious conception. I would just beware not to place it on a pedestal and not to assume that it looks a certain way. But know that exactly as it appears and exactly as it shows up is the best way for us to heal and for us to grow and awaken. And that, to me, conception and bringing in a child really is about the evolution of consciousness. There's a lot of traditions around the world, indigenous traditions, in regards to preconception, and a very special connection that or affirmation, I would say. I spent some time last December in Egypt, and it was a dream that brought me there. Dreams, actually, ever since my first pregnancy, have remained very active. So that first pregnancy of mine really opened the door to the dream world. And now, even still, 12 years later, I pretty much wake up every morning with anywhere between 5 and 30 dreams, like crystal clear. It is the other half of my life. It's partially how I navigate and know what to anticipate next in my physical waking life. And I did receive a dream about going to Egypt, and it was a summoning. And that was a little bit curious to me, as I didn't have a conscious desire to go to Egypt. Some women or some individuals speak about it like, I've been dreaming of Egypt my whole life. I've always wanted to go there. That was really not my truth. That was never really what it was for me. I mean, I had studied, Egyptian history when I homeschooled, and that my mom would say that was my favorite topic that we covered, and little things. But I don't know, I didn't have like a conscious desire to go there, but the dream was clear and a pathway unfolded, and I went last December. And as my feet kind of walked up the steps of the temple of Hathor in Dendara, hand in hand with a very close ally and sister, and my heart just began to soften and open and flower, and tears just began to pour out of my eyes. And we both, hand in hand, were just in tears, and that summoning, that energy, that vibration, that voice from the dream that summoned me, it was made clear to me that was coming from that temple. And so the Hathor is the goddess of many things, but she's very much known for being the goddess of conception, childbearing, birthing, motherhood, sacred sexuality, sacred song and dance, women's womb mysteries, and blood mysteries. So we went in to the temple and had some extremely amazing experiences. And there was one experience where we went into, we were invited by one of the temple guardians, which was a very sweet surprise. He pointed to like a little door in the wall that had a metal gate over it, and he was pointing, "Get in, go in, go in." I was like, are you sure? Looks dark. But I looked back at our guide who had been traveling with us through Egypt, just the three of us, and he kind of placed his hand over his heart and went, "Yes, go, 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 yes." And I could tell he was very touched at the invitation. And so I wondered what was on the other side, and it was like a little stone birth canal. We kind of shimmied our way through, crawled through, and fortunately there was a light on the other end that got turned on, and it was a crypt, and it was a very narrow passageway, very small, and there were 2 hieroglyphic scenes that I was drawn to, and already I was just a bundle of tears. I was just touched in a way that can't be put into words, and was just in full body tears. And I stood in front of these 2 hieroglyphic scenes, and the guide was also given permission to come, which is very rare. And he stood up and he showed me, okay, this one, okay, this one, yes, yes, yes. So the 2 scenes, one of them are the codes of enlightenment. And side by side was the codes in hieroglyphs for birth. And I stood in front of them and I went, yes, 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 yes. I remember, yes, yes, yes. 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 As a child comes through, or think of it this way, what would it be to be born in full recognition of the truth of who you are, to be able to stay connected, to not forget who truly you are. and the essence of who you are, and perhaps the significance of this and the importance of reclaiming this, and that this has been known, that this is an ancient futuristic remembering that we know actually biologically that a woman can experience and taste enlightenment. Just hormonally, biologically, we know that this is possible for a woman in labor. And so what is it then to encode our children with this enlightenment as they come in, and to welcome them truly for who they are and why they're here, and to be connected to the gifts that they bring humanity, and to be, again, stewards of that from the beginning. Wow. So there's much that could be said here, and this is very much like the passion of my work, and working with women and couples preconception onward. So working with women and couples to clear the blocks and prepare, and to conceive and to go through their pregnancy journeys, welcoming in their children with, in a way, eyes wide open, and just tuning in with their souls and spirits, and understanding again the gifts of why they're coming, and how to be stewards of that, and what are the gifts they're activating in us, and what is it that they're inviting us to remember more deeply and truly, and then to walk with women and couples and families through birth, something that I also do. And then, of course, very much so on the other side, that postpartum, that raw, tender postpartum period of, now I'm changed, now I have the opportunity, right, to meet myself anew, and to welcome the mother, and to learn how to bring the maiden along, that she doesn't need to be rejected, but now it's different, right? It's new normals.
Yes. I had chills when you were speaking about the babies coming through, knowing who they are, and what a huge effect that would have on our planet.
Yeah.
Wow. Such beautiful, powerful work. And there's so much we could talk about, so much I would love to keep hearing. But I think what I'll ask is just, how can people stay in touch with you? What are some of your offerings? What are you excited about? What's coming up in your business? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, thank you. So I do clairvoyant mentoring containers, where I work with women and couples either throughout preconception, pregnancy, or postpartum, and we're all, now is always the right time to be reborn, to go deeper into the truth of who you are and why you've come, and to reclaim that. And knowing that when we do, right, we're sending rippling healing throughout the collective, throughout our lineages, forward and back, and to our future families. So I work with women who are experiencing spiritual rebirths, or who are calling one in, and are looking for mentorship and guidance. And just as much as I work with preconception and pregnant women and couples. So those are one-on-one containers. I currently have a waiting list, and so I'll be opening up new spaces in January for anyone interested. And actually, the reason why I'm waiting until January is that in December, I will be returning to Egypt with my dear ally, Sister Cynthia Davy, founder of Goddess Rising. And together we are bringing 22 women to Egypt. And we will be actually on the very last night of our 2-week journey pilgrimage. We will be we've actually worked with the Egyptian government to privately rent the Dendara temple, the temple of Hathor, and we will be on her rooftop for the moonrise on a full moon. And we will be doing ceremony there as sisters with the full moon rising, and to be in that temple again. Just know, I just want to send out a prayer now to you, to all of your listeners, that you will all be in my heart, that all of our collective awakening. Actually feeling really touched in this collective awakening is so much on this planet, and it starts with us.
Yeah, it's important work. and it's happening. And yes, again, I had chills seeing you all there in my mind on that temple, being in ritual. Well, Sarah, it has been an honor to have you on today and to hear your beautiful stories and the power and to feel the importance of this work you're doing. And I just wonder if you have any closing words, anything you'd like to leave the listeners with before I end with a short prayer.
Yeah. So I would just invite everyone to place their hand over their heart, their right hand over their heart, and their left hand 2 fingers below their navel. Close your eyes for just a minute. And just tuning into this breath, into this moment, this exploration, this journey that we just took together. And just speaking these words for all of us, for the sake of humanity. Let us remember who we truly are, who we're calling in and why, so that we can welcome the next generations into a world who sees the true value of life, of these bodies, and the greater arc of our soul's journeys home, for we are truly and simply walking each other home. And it's been an honor to journey with all of you today and to explore these topics, and I invite in much more of this. And so it is.
And so it is. Just bringing my hands to my heart and just bowing to you, Sarah. So much gratitude. Thank you for your wisdom. And to everyone listening, may you walk with beauty on your path. And may this information be of service to you in your life. Namaste. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.